All right, and we're live. Thank you everyone for tuning into this edition of No Capes. I am on air today with Mr. Luke Stokes. Say hi, Luke.
Hello. Thanks so very much for having me.
Thank you for coming on. So for anyone who doesn't know who you are, can you just give a quick 5-second, who is Luke Stokes?
Sure. My name is Luke Stokes. I started a company called FoxyCart with my business partner. It's an e-commerce shopping cart system, and I happen to live down the street from Cal Evans, so that's kind of how I got connected to all the PHP community.
Nice. And so you're in Nashville then?
Mm-hmm. Yep, I'm in Nashville, and yeah, he looped me into being part of the Nashville PHP community, and then was like, "You need to come speak at my conference," which was PHP Tech back in, I think, 2012, I think it was. So I spoke there and I met Adam Culp, and he's like, "You got to come speak at my conference in Florida." And then I did that and just started meeting a bunch of awesome people. And that's kind of how it all started.
You cut out for about half of that.
Oh, no, that's not good.
So you met Cal Evans and he got you into the PHP community, and then he said you needed to come speak at his conference.
Well, yes, which was PHP Tech in 2012. And then I met Adam Culp there, who said, "Hey, you should come give that same talk at my conference." I did a talk on hypermedia APIs. So then I spoke in Florida at Sunshine PHP. And then I've spoken at a few other conferences since then. But it just got to meet the awesome PHP community from then on. And then we started sponsoring different conferences, my business partner, Brett Florio, and I with FoxyCart. And it's just an amazing community. It's kind of been fun to get to know people on Twitter and meet them at conferences and hang out with them. Yeah, it's been fun.
Cool. So your first talk at PHP Tech was about hypermedia APIs?
Yep. We talked a lot about how we went from a plain old XML API into using an hypermedia API. So that would be a REST API that actually uses hypermedia, because that's one of the constraints of a REST API, that it has Helios, hypermedia, as the engine of application state. And we were, I remember showing Larry Garfield the HAL browser at the time, and he was like, "Oh my gosh, that's cool. Like, that's the first thing I've seen that makes me think hypermedia has something neat about it." So he pulled me aside afterwards, and we had a cool conversation. And then later he brought me into some of the Drupal conversations, and now they're using HAL for their format for their API. So it was pretty neat to see things come full circle.
That is really cool. Hypermedia APIs is actually something that I wanted to talk to you about. So cool. Can you do a quick?
Oh, I think I'm dropping you on that. My ping times are looking good. So I don't think it's me dropping this time. Hopefully not. Are you there?
I'm here. I think it might be my connection that's having a problem.
Mine was too, so I think it's both of us. So I heard all the way up to, can I give a quick overview of hypermedia APIs?
Yes. Context for the win.
All right, nice. Yeah, hypermedia APIs, it's a term that I think it was Steve Klabnik started using, because a lot of people were kind of butchering REST APIs. They're like, "Oh, look at my cool REST API." And it's like, no, you just have pretty URLs. That's pretty much, they'd look at something built in Ruby or something and say, well, it must be REST because it has pretty URLs and it uses HTTP verbs. But then Leonard Richardson did something called the Richardson Maturity Model. And it's a really great way to think about APIs as far as REST APIs using hypermedia and different levels of REST. And so you've got, like, okay, you're using uniform resource objects, you're using URLs, you're using patch, post, put, those kind of HTTP methods to kind of work with those resources modeled as URLs. But then when you go further up, the top of the chain is really Helios, which is hypermedia as the engine of application state. And so when we were going to rebuild our API a while back, I was like, okay, I really want to learn about this stuff. So I spent a ton of time researching all kinds of stuff, watching all kinds of webinars. I went to RESTfest, which is a conference in South Carolina that is amazing. It's one of those where, like, if you show up, you have to give a talk. So it's a really intimate group, about 50 people, and it's kind of like Fight Club. Like, you have to give a talk if you show up, even if it's just a 5-minute talk. So I've been there the last 3 years, and it's just an amazing, amazing conference. I'm going again this year as well. It's awesome. So I learned a ton at that conference, and I started just kind of talking about it, thinking about it, saying, okay, we have this XML, basically RPC, remote procedure call API right now that's just really confusing. It has all these different kind of method names you have to memorize and read through the docs. And we said, okay, if I'm going to do it right, what's the way to do it? And I started reading about this, and I was like, I think a hypermedia API, an API that uses links, makes a lot of sense. And when we think about the internet is super successful because when you go to ESPN.com, you don't have to download a new browser when they change their website. Your browser just gets a whole bunch of content, reinterprets it, shows you the images where they're supposed to be, and it shows you the links where they're supposed to be. And if the login button moves over to the top right and it used to be on the top left, it's no big deal. You just go, oh, there it is, and you click on it, and you can go ahead and log in. And so what's made the internet for more than a decade be so successful is this concept of hypermedia being the engine of application state. So every web page you download, you just start at the home page, and then every other page is linked to via hypermedia. And so this is a really, really powerful concept. There's also all these other pieces, you know, the different constraints of REST that Roy Fielding talks about in his paper. But it talks about, like, you don't know if you're talking to the origin server. You might be talking to a cache server. You don't know, like, the client has no knowledge of what the URL is going to be underneath that link. The server gets to control that. And so that there's all these different pieces as far as caching and other different things that allow for things to be very scalable, very responsive, and very powerful. And so people that are realizing this is what's made the internet be really successful are thinking, hey, why don't we start doing our APIs this way? Get our computers to talk to each other using hypermedia, get our clients to be a little less smart, and have the server really say, hey, I'm the domain expert. I know what's going on with these resources. I'll let you know what you can do next. So when you hit the home page, it says, okay, here's all your links. You can go, and in our case, you know, you can look at a store and view your transactions or create a new cart. You know, those are kind of things that the server allows the client to do via hypermedia. So in essence, if it's a REST API, if it's a true REST API or a hypermedia API, then in the response, when you look at what they just sent you, it's going to have links to other stuff you can go do. And that's kind of the basics of it.
Okay, so I'm somewhat unfamiliar actually with hypermedia APIs. So when you're talking about this concept of links coming back, is that all you can?
I think I lost you again there.
Just essentially?
I'm sorry, I missed that. So when the links come back, you said, is that all? And then I missed some of it.
Is that, I mean, you have to use the links? I mean, what, is it just to help you, I guess?
The idea is, like, with if you, kind of the difference between a hypermedia API, what you'd probably see often, most APIs are what I would call JSON RPC, the remote procedure calls, where you get this, or kind of like SOAP, they give you a WSDL that says, here's all the methods you can call on our API. And you have to memorize all those. You have to know what the inputs are, what the outputs are, and you just call them however you want to call them. And there's no structure to it. There's no hierarchy. There's no kind of understanding of how these resources interact with each other and how they relate to each other. Whereas, like, with a website, you know, you navigate a website, you usually see the top navigation, main concepts, and then you drill down to other concepts, and everything has a structure, everything makes sense. So the hypermedia follows that same concept where you've got one thing you want to do, and then, for example, like, I'll just use the Foxcard API as an example. You wouldn't jump right to, you know, a very specific coupon code, but instead you'd start from a store, and then you're going to have all your different coupons that you configure for that store, and then each one of those coupons are going to have individual coupon codes. So every resource is going to be represented. In our case, we use HAL as a media type for that representation. But you've got, you know, a coupon, and then in the coupon, you might have a link you can post to generate a bunch of coupon codes for you. That might be something that the server does automatically. Or you can list out the existing coupon codes, or you can list out all the transactions that have used one of these coupons. You know, all these different things that kind of make all the data make sense and give it some context and give it some understanding. And what's very cool about that, it's also self-discovery. So you don't have to read tons and tons of documentation. If I just want to manage the coupons for my store and I don't care about all the other features of the API, I can literally just open up curl, start hitting it, and go, oh, what's next? Oh, I can go do that. What does that look like? Oh, and then do a get over there. Or I can do an options and say, what can I do here? I can do a post, I can do a put, I can do a patch. So it's really self-documenting. So it's really, really helpful for a developer to just go in there and understand right away what the API's features are. And then also what's neat about that too is we can add new features very easily. Twilio does this often, actually, is they'll add features, they call them dark features, where there's just a new link all of a sudden. Maybe they haven't even documented it yet, and they just add it in there, and people who are paying attention kind of go, oh, hey, what's that? Let me tinker with that, you know, and they do a request to see what's there. So it enables this really loose coupling between the client and the server. And that's one of the most important things about a hypermedia API. And that's really what's been so powerful with the internet, is that, again, when the browser goes to a new website, you don't have to, like, download a new browser. They're completely decoupled. The browser is just interpreting a message that the server has sent. And I mean, how long has HTML been around? Changes that have been made over the years have been very, very easy for browsers to adapt to. So it's that loose coupling is really powerful. So I can add new fields to the message. I can add new link relationships or affordances, things that the client can do from that point when they want to jump to some other point. So there's a lot of cool features with Hypermedia API that you wouldn't get with like SOAP as an example, or any kind of RPC where it's like, oh no, I changed one method name to this call, and so all the clients broke. You know, we don't get that with Hypermedia API because it's just a link, and you can post to it, you can do an options on it, you know, that kind of thing.
Okay, so that sounds pretty useful. So based on you talking about it, it sounds like you went through quite a journey from, I need to rewrite my API, and I'm going to look into this stuff, to now I'm giving talks at conferences about this. How long would you say that journey was? How long did it take you to become kind of a expert?
That's a good question. Well, I have a blog post I did on my personal blog. I'll have to go look when it was dated, but I remember the talk I gave at Tech was 2012. And I think that was in like 2010 or 2011. So it was a lot of deep research. I mean, I'd probably say at least 6 months of really diving in. And I watched all the Apiary stuff. I watched all the, like all the major API companies that are out there, the ones that did their own kind of webinars. I watched a bunch of Roy Fielding's dissertation. I read any blog post I could find on it. And, oh, sorry, I might be cutting out a little bit there. Let me know if I'm back.
You're back now.
All right, cool. I read, basically consumed everything I could. Every webinar I could find. There was also API Craft group on Google, the Google group API Craft. That is an amazing Google group that I learned a ton from the people there. It's a little bit different than the Yahoo REST Discuss, which is kind of like the old one. Those guys were like really hardcore, like, you got to do it our way, or, you know, you're not official. And the people at API Craft are a lot kinder. So I learned a lot just asking them really dumb questions, and they were really helpful. And then I think what got the most, I think, for me was watching webinars that kind of said, okay, here's 5 different APIs, and here's what this one does well, but they get all these other things wrong. Here's what this one does well, but they get all these other things wrong. So like versioning is an often topic people discuss at length. Whether or not to use custom media types or go with like a HAL or a Siren or collection JSON or some of these other new ones that are out as well. I kind of learned and said, well, if they're doing that piece right, why don't I just take that piece into what I'm doing? And then if they're doing this piece right, let me try to do that as well. And I had enough together that I put a blog post out of just kind of everything I learned. So if someone was to come to our API and they'd be like, why'd you do that? That doesn't make sense. I at least point them to the blog post and be like, well, there's every reason why I made those decisions. So if you don't like it, you can talk to those people because they know a lot more than I did. And after I just kind of kept talking about it more, again, Cal kind of convinced me like, hey, you should talk about this at a conference. And then he got me to talk about it first at the local Nashville PHP meetup group. And then there, go and talk about it at some conferences. And it was actually really surprising, especially going to the RESTfest conference, to be around these experts. I mean, these guys have written the specs that I'm talking about. They've written the books. I mean, Mike Amundsen, Leonard Richardson, Kevin Swiber. I mean, all these guys like that are it when it comes to the API community. Ben Longden, Evan, they were there, and I was learning from them, and they were just like, oh yeah, you're right on track. What you're doing makes total sense. This is pretty cool. So that was really encouraging.
That is awesome. You kind of meet your heroes and find out that you're doing okay. It's not a bad feeling.
Totally. Because we're all so insecure, you know. We're just like, that's one of the things that I like to talk about too, is like developers, we work so hard to make it right, and we know it's not right. Because 6 months later, we're going to be like, what were we thinking? So we already know that we're going into it like with the mindset of we're going to fail. And so I think that's one of the biggest challenges for developers, is how to overcome your own insecurities, your own understanding of failure, and say, hey, look, we're all doing the very best we can. And if we can provide value for someone along the way, awesome, you know?
Yeah, no, I think honestly, that's one of my favorite things. If I look at any old code that I wrote and I'm not just thoroughly disgusted with it, then I haven't grown at all. And that's a problem.
Yeah. So. That's a good way I like that. That's a much better way to look at it than, man, what the heck was I thinking?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of like, what the heck was I thinking? But also, yay, I'm not that stupid anymore.
Yeah, so. Definitely.
And this is one of the few professions where you can, I would assume, I haven't been in any other professions really, but I would assume at some point you like peak, and there's, you know, with development, it feels like you can always get less stupid.
Yeah, no, that's a good point, because there's always new languages, new techniques, new design patterns, new approaches, new, you know, media formats. Yeah, it's hard to stay up on it all. It's just too much.
Yeah, It's living the dream we are. So the Cal, being the amazing person that he is, got you to speak at a user group and then got you to a conference. What was it like that first talk you gave? Were you nervous?
Oh gosh, yes. I was very, very nervous. And I felt like, can I talk at a conference I've never been to before? And then later I realized PHP Tech is kind of like a big deal. It's like one of the biggest tech conferences in the PHP world. And so I was very nervous. I think
So
I
wait,
was in.
did you realize that before or after you spoke?
No, I didn't realize it until I was leading up to doing the talk. Like I agreed to it without realizing it was such a big deal. And I was like, why is the first conference I'm going to speak at like a conference where people pay a lot of money and expect it to be really good? It's like, this has me nervous. But I think it went really well. And I was definitely nervous. I'm always nervous when I talk, but I also, every time I do it, I think, wow, that was really good, because I get great feedback from people who are like, this helped me. This really got me to think about how to do things better. And that's super encouraging. And that to me that's what it's all about. But yeah, definitely it was nerve-wracking. And then to have that continue with speaking at other places as well. And then I kind of like, the last year or so, it was like, I'm gonna put things on hold just a little bit and not submit. And then I get asked to do a couple keynotes as well. So it's like, even if I wanted to not do it, it still happens. Or at least it has recently, which is kind of funny.
It's not a bad problem to have, though.
No, not at all. It's amazing. It was incredible. I was honored. I was blown away. But I always feel like I don't put enough effort into preparing, or I don't put enough effort into like refining everything. And I always feel that way until I give the talk and everyone's like, oh, that was great. So I was like, okay, good.
So how many talks would you say you've given so far since 2012?
Let's see. I'm trying to think. I've given, let's see, Sunshine. I think I've spoken a couple times. I gave a talk at, well, actually it was on a panel on Bitcoin, actually, at ZenCon. Spoken at Lone Star. I think I spoke at Midwest, but then we also sponsor. I get them confused because we sponsor a lot that I don't speak at, and then I've spoken at a bunch of others as well. So I don't know, maybe half a dozen, maybe more, somewhere around there. Yeah, probably a little more than that. Probably forgetting some.
Do you still get nervous every time?
Yeah, I think so. Not crazy nervous though. I mean, I think that I've done it well enough that if I'm prepared and I know the material, it's just a matter of getting over those butterflies, standing up there and say, okay, here it is. Let's go do it. You know.
Do you have like a pre-talk routine? Do you do jumping jacks or?
No. Yeah, I heard your talking to Itz and about how like he goes out and does a bunch of stuff. And no, I just try to stand up tall, breathe, get some good deep breaths, smile. That's something that I think helps a lot, is just smile at the audience. And then as I'm giving the talk, try and look people in the eye. I think that's really important, is just connect with the audience, look people in the eye. Because once they see the speaker kind of looking at them directly, I think they realize, oh, this person's a human too, just like me. They're no different. And I think that's important.
Yeah, I think adding in the human aspect is definitely important and helpful for both sides of the podium, I guess. How do you feel about Q&A? That's a question that I ask a lot.
How do I feel about what?
Q&A, the questions afterwards. Does that make you more or less nervous? Does it bother you? Are you scared?
No, actually, I love them. I think question answers are fun. I really get excited about it because I feel that's a lot more free flowing and it's a lot more natural for me because I like helping people and I like being challenged. So I actually do that a lot. And it was interesting. The last talk I gave, it was like the format being a keynote didn't really lend itself to being a Q&A thing. So, and it was the last one. So I was kind of like, I guess I'll just cut out the Q&A. And I kind of feel like that was a mistake. Like I really enjoy the Q&A, but you don't see Q&A often with keynotes. So it was a little bit weird to not have the Q&A, but I really do enjoy it. I like being able to have people bring a real problem related to what we're doing and say, oh yeah, I've got some experience on that. Or say, wow, I don't know, I'm gonna look into that because I'm curious about that myself. But mostly the Q&As have gone really well, I think.
Okay, what about?
Quick enough to give time for them anyway.
I'm sorry, you broke up there a little bit for me. I think it's my connection. What was that?
I said when I give enough time for them, when I actually finish in time for the QA.
Do you find timing to be difficult when you're giving talks? Do you usually run short or run over?
I'm usually okay. I think the last talk I gave, I was really surprised that I finished early. Usually I'll finish pretty good timing and have time for QA, but the last one, I added 5 more minutes of content to it, and I still finished about 10, 15 minutes early, and I was really surprised by that. That was at Lone Star just recently doing the keynote there. But I still think it went well. I think I got nervous at the end on the timing because my wife walked in with all her kids, and I was like, oh no, pretty girl in the back looking at me. I got nervous.
All right. You know what? I think, let me do this. I think I might actually cut this episode short because my connection's being really bad. Can I reschedule with you?
Sure, if you want to.
Sorry. Yeah, you're like every other word's cutting out for me, but I have someone watching who says it's fine. So apparently it's my connection. And I think I'm really loving this conversation. I think it deserves a bit better than what optimum internet, whatever the hell I have, is giving it. So I will bump up my internet connection. And I'm really, really sorry for the 7 people who are watching and for you. I'll make sure to reschedule soon, and we'll rehash this conversation and then continue it.
That'll work.
Apologies. For anyone watching, Nomad PHP is currently going on, and PHP Roundtable and Loosely Coupled are doing a Go find those. Enjoy your evening entertainment, and I will reschedule with you, Luke.
Alrighty, no worries. Hey, I'm